It's time for the Locals Only podcast with Dixon.
Yo, what's up, everybody? It's another edition of the 95X Locals Only podcast. I am Dixon. This week, we are joined by Rob McCall of All Poets and Heroes. Rob, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. This is 2 nights you've taken out of your life for us this week. In case you missed it, Monday night, we did a very special 315 is Alive with Rob about All Poets and Heroes. Their most recent single from Locals Only is called 21. We dove into that. So if you want to go back and check that out, it's in the IGTV section at 95X Syracuse on Instagram. I want to dive into the new EP. May 27th is the release date. The title track is out in the world. Tell us all about this EP because I'm so excited.
Yeah, man, it's a thing that came out of the pandemic, as we kind of touched on in the IG. We had time to write and to get this together, and we had been toying around with some songs. And so the cool part about this is a while back, we were a band called Walden, and that lasted for like a month because it wasn't a very good name. But we had to put up a thing for, what we thought our band name should be. So All Poets and Heroes is up there. I think there was one like Former Inhabitants. And then this tweet that I saw had this thing called Colorful Lungs, and I didn't know what it was. Can't remember who tweeted it, but it was cool. And Corey and I really started to fall in love with this name. And I think in a weird way, we wanted Colorful Lungs to be our band name, but All Poets and Heroes just sounded more like a band. So this is 5 years ago. So Corey's been like, Colorful Lungs will be something someday. He's been saying it for years. I didn't believe him. So during the pandemic, he's like, hey, I wrote Colorful Lungs finally. And that was sort of like the kickoff for this. Like I remember listening to the chorus, and then I wrote the story around what he had written for the chorus. And I just remember being like, oh man, he didn't lie to me. Like 5 years ago, he was like, Colorful Lungs will be something. And it turned into this song. And I think Corey and I knew right then, as we were putting together some other songs, that we were going to go record these songs. And Corey's like, I think it's got to be called Colorful Lungs, like not just because of the song, but because of everything else that's kind of gone along with it. And it does feel like the name of an album, of an EP or whatever. So it kind of just stuck. And yeah, so that's the story of that. But the EP itself it's just gonna be 6 songs, and they have part 1. Yes, sorry, part 1. Part 2 will be out at the end of summer. So the first EP that's coming out has, as me as a songwriter, I love when Corey and I collaborate, but there are songs that like I write on my own or Corey writes on his own that we really push for. And we're like, hey, I think this should be something. So 2 of my favorite songs that I've ever written and Corey and I got to collaborate on musically, one's called Above Water, which is a song that is really, it just means a lot to me. I think the lyrics are coded, but they're in a way that everybody can understand the sentiment behind it. Like you might not understand every little detail of the lyrics, but you understand the sentiment, and it ends in this really cool cinematic moment. And I'm really excited about that one. And then there's a song called Over Now, which is a very simple and pretty 2-chord song. And it's just about, it was originally about just like my family and about how you look back on a lot of the things that you had growing up, and you're an adult now, and you just realize that a lot of those things are just done. They came and went, and they were beautiful in the moment. When I was putting together the music video for it, which is actually a compilation of home videos that my parents had put on like a little thumb drive, and I got really emotional. Like it was just really, and like all of a sudden the whole song made sense to me. And while it is about my family, it's also just about, it's like about coming of age and how, yeah, it feels like sometimes humans have a great way of overcomplicating things, right? You look back on your childhood and it was fairly simple, and now you're an adult and everything seems so messy and complicated. And you also realize that as I was watching my young parents in these videos, I'm like, they were amazing parents because they were messy, complicated 20 somethings when they had me and my brother. And they did it with such grace, and they just did it so well. And as anybody who has a kid, and I don't have a kid, but I know the sentiment now, none of it comes with a guidebook. And my brother and I definitely weren't perfect, and my parents really did an amazing job, and we had a pretty amazing childhood. And so that song is a really special one to me. So those two songs on this upcoming EP, I'm really looking forward to. And I think the titular track, Colorful Lungs, is a very pretty song, and 21, which you have so awesomely featured, as a song that we're really proud of. I felt like it was a good way to declare ourselves as this is a new version of All Poets and Heroes. So yeah, a lot to look forward to in the coming months here.
Well, something you brought up on Instagram that I kind of wanted to expound upon a little bit, and I clumsily did, but we were also pressed for time.
Mm-hmm.
Is like the thing about 21 that really struck me, right, was like, and I think I know you well enough that you understand where I'm coming from with this, and I'm not like trying to be douchey in any way.
Okay.
There were times with All Poets where it just didn't feel like a complete thought, right?
Yeah.
Like from single to single to single to single, it's just like you were trying to find yourselves, right? Like,
Yeah,
where should we lean, right? Like, and I get young bands doing that, right? It's like, hey, we're going to try this. That didn't work. We're going to try this. That seemed to work okay. Let's expound upon. Oh, that didn't work. Let's go over here. And I love that, because everything he did was always All Poets and Heroes, right? There was that anchor point that made you realize who it was. This was the first time where, like, and I said this on the Instagram, where like I heard the song and I was like, okay, there's a comfort now. You sort of like All Poets and Heroes, for like a great analogy, was like your dad's hoodie, right? And he gave it to you when you were like 12, and you wore it because like, it's my dad's hoodie, right?
Yeah.
Now you're 20 and it actually fits, right? Like it fits how it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Fit. That's what that song felt like to me when you guys sent it over and I started playing it on the air.
What a wonderful analogy. I feel like that is really the perfect thing that kind of encompasses where we were at the time. And I mentioned on the IG live there that I think it was just like, we weren't, I wouldn't say it was clumsily, because we always do everything with at least a lot of intention, but I really do feel like, and maybe this is why we've, ebbed and flowed with how successful or unsuccessful we've felt, at least. But I think, there really wasn't a thing that was this like declarative, like, no, this is All Poets and Heroes, and not only what they're capable of, but like, this is really the launching pad. And I remember feeling like Oculism was very special. It was the first time we did an album, and Corey is a brilliant producer, and he made this story out of it. But there are moments on there where it's just like, yeah, that's a pretty song. That's cool. But like, where does it all fit? And we made a story out of it. So if you listen to that album, like top down, it's a cool experience. But I would agree that there really wasn't anything that was like a declarative statement to say like, no, this is who All Poets and Heroes is. And I'm really more or less feeling that way and optimistic with the new stuff. But I agree that 21, it was a cool amalgam of both Corey and my talents as well. Like, from what I've learned from recording and what I hear now when we make music. And I was given the freedom to experiment with that song vocally and with some other ideas that we never had the luxury to do, because we were writing during a pandemic and I didn't have a job for 4 months. So what else was I going to do but plug in and try stuff? And I had never had that freedom before, where we weren't in like a studio or pressed for time, where somebody's like, hey, stop. We're just going to we got this. We got the part. Don't worry about that. So that was cool. And we had a lot of moments like that on this. And I think, it definitely feels like there's more of like a stamp of this is All Poets and Heroes, and this is a better launching pad for us sonically.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things that happens, over the course of time. Like if you go back and listen to like the very first Manchester Orchestra record that I can never remember the name of because I never listened to it. there's a song on there called Golden Ticket, which is what got me into the band. But like once like Mean Everything to Nothing came out, like I totally didn't want to hear that first record ever again, because on that first record you could tell that there was like too much thought, right? Like it almost felt wrought with like overthinking, like and then you hear Mean Everything to Nothing, and Andy's voice isn't overproduced, and the songs are more natural sounding. That's sort of like the dichotomy of what I've heard from All Poets and Heroes up until the new stuff, and now new with the new stuff, right? I think that you guys have I don't want to say overthought, but I think that for the first time you guys actually sat down with the idea of writing music without any sort of like box in mind that you were going to put in. It's just whatever comes out, right? Like you weren't trying to like, because this is the first time you guys have done something in a while where you didn't hit me up and just kind of like ask like about like a radio question, right? About like, you know, and I loved that like you had new music and I had no idea because we hadn't had that conversation this time, right? Like that was sort of like an endearing moment for me of like, oh, this is awesome. Like they're finally just doing what they want to do. And there's nothing wrong as a young band going to an older person or a more experienced person and asking for advice. And I'm never going to be that dream crusher, right? Where it's like, hey man, don't worry about radio, just write for you. Because like, I know that some young bands need that. Hey, you know, keep it under 3.5 minutes, you know, just make sure that there's a hook, make sure that you do the chorus at least 3 times. Like, here's all the fundamentals that I've learned. I love that this is the most natural sounding All Poets and Heroes have been. And I love vocally what you did on 21, right? Like, it was just like this sort of like, it was very honest sounding. Like, not that anything else wasn't, but there was just, like an open wound in a good way, right? Like,
I think a lot of, going back to your thing about overthinking, I think especially with our early stuff, we felt like we had so much to prove, right? Like, and you put so much pressure on it. And I remember with the first record, Oculism, there was a song we really didn't touch called Man in the Crowd that became probably one of the more popular ones once people actually started listening to it. And it was the one that we had totally forgotten about. Like, it was just the forgotten child. Like, I remember we did it in like a 3-day stretch and like really not even 3 full dedicated days. Like 40 minutes for that song here. Oh, I guess we'll do the vocals for it now. And it became one of our favorites. And I think that's why we left it a little more open-ended. And then even Cruel was a song that I really enjoyed. And I think the only thought of production that we really did on that one was the vocal harmonies at one part. But that, you know, even that, but those are like 2 of my more favorite songs on the record. And they were the ones that we probably did the least amount to. But I think with the rest of the record, it was like, we have to show people that we're talented. And how do you do that? You pull out every little trick that you know of to make a wall of sound or to make something sound spooky or grandiose or whatever. And then vocally too, I mean, we did take after take vocally and lyrically. I was revising lyrics before the vocal take day. Like, we'd have vocals in 2 hours. I'd be revising the lyrics. Like, this sounds more poetic, or this will prove to people that I can write like Jeff Buckley. I'll flip my voice here and I can do this here. And I think really with writing in here, we didn't overthink the vocals at all. It was just like, yeah, Rob, go in and sing, man. Like, what are you feeling when you sing this song? Go in and sing. And obviously, you know, you fine tune some notes here and there, but I think with this one in particular, it was just like, we actually wrote 21 was written in about 4 hours, which we've also never done. And then there's another song that's going to come out later on the second half of the EP, which lyrically is just word vomit. I just kept singing this melody and then I just grabbed like a bunch of parts and it makes no sense. Like, lyrically, it's just gibberish, but it's one of the more cooler experiences on our record. And I remember we played it live and there was this girl who came up to us and she's like, oh, what was that song? Like that little 2.5-minute song. I was like, oh, really? That's the one? She goes, yeah. She goes, what's it about? I go, I have no idea. I have no idea what that song is about.
When you go back to like, I mean, this is really well known, and most Nirvana songs don't really mean anything. It was Kurt just finding words that sounded good in the moment, right? Like, and then toying around with the idea of finding something that sounded like that word until it kind of made sense in the context of the song. You know, like one of my favorite bands from Syracuse ever was Bad Cops, and they had a little 4-song EP, came out in like 2002, 2003. But the one big song on the record was called Gorin Tinto, and it got to a point where they played it live a couple of times before the EP came out, and they just had a part they had sung that was just whoa and oh.
Yeah.
But because the live crowd loved it so much, they were just placeholders to put lyrics there later. That ended up being the final song.
Love that.
Like, so sometimes it's more about like the vibe. I know that word is completely and totally overused these days, but like sometimes it really is about that feeling in the moment and how it connects to other people, right? Like,
Yeah.
You can have all the production value in the world. If the song isn't honest and sincere and well written, it's not going to connect.
Yeah, I think I stopped putting so much pressure on myself for lyrics, and I can speak of that because I write a lot of the lyrics for the band. And I think once I took the weight off of that, like Above Water is another song, which one of the ones I'm really excited about. That whole like first verse into like this little pre-chorus that we have came out one day. I'd been playing around with this very simple chord progression, and I had my phone hitting record just in case something popped up. I didn't change a word from that original phone recording. I didn't change the way I sung it since that original phone recording. And I think about an hour later, I ended up writing the chorus in the second verse. And I just was like, because I think it also, like, I felt it as they were coming out. Like, even if I didn't totally understand where it was coming from in my essence, I just said that was well put together, kind of out of nowhere. And I remember posting it to like Facebook, like a really crappy phone recording, a video of me playing it. And one of my friends, Laura, who lives down in New York City and plays in a band called Ghost Funk Orchestra, commented on it. And she was like, okay, when did you start ripping people's hearts out? And I was just like, oh, I didn't know that. And like, she's somebody whose opinion I very much value. Very talented musician herself. So it was something where I was like, oh, maybe I'm onto something. So I sent it to Corey, and Corey like showed up at my house. He's like, we're going to work on that. I was like, sweet. So it's just one of those things where I was like, oh, I don't need to be so critical. Like, I'm not writing poetry to try to win a Nobel laureate or something. You know, I'm very much just writing to try to connect with people and selfishly to connect with myself.
Right.
And I think once you start over editing yourself,
like, I mean, if this was a stream of consciousness thing, then you sort of tapped into this subconscious artistry that has always existed, right? But now you know how to get there.
Yeah. And I think once you start over editing yourself, it's like you're censoring yourself. It's, you know, but I had to learn that the hard way. I had to learn it through trying to throw the kitchen sink at everything and realizing that that's probably not a good representation.
Right. I mean, and let's be honest, not everybody's going to be Billie Eilish, who breaks open at 17 because her famous brother wrote a bunch of great songs for her. Right. And that's taking nothing away from Billie, because as a performer, I mean,
she's incredible.
There's nobody in her league, especially in her little demographic of young artists, right? Like,
yeah, no, she's definitely set a stage for herself.
Phenomenal. But that's the lightning strike. That's the 1 in a million, right?
Yep, totally.
Everybody else that makes it has to go through these struggles, right? Like every band that you love was at one time just some other band in their hometown.
Yeah.
And they went through what you guys have gone through, right? Like getting stiffed on gigs, dealing with mean or crappy promoters that don't want to pay you, fighting for gigs, you know, dealing with sort of like that crippling thing of like trying to figure out like where you're at, right? Like, and I think that unfortunately, like, because you know, the whole mental health aspect in general in America has been stigmatized for so long that artists who are usually the most empathetic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually the most emotional people always felt stigmatized about like having real conversations with other musicians about like, yo, like I feel like a total failure and I hate the last 10 things I've done and blah, blah, blah. Where like your buddy might just be like, oh, dude, me too. No, like, I think your stuff's great. And then you can sort of be like, oh yeah, well, you're still, you know, like, And it hasn't been up until we were all stuck inside for 2 years that I think that like more people are willing to do that for one another, right? So like that's why there's competition in the local music scene instead of collaboration, is because nobody wants to say out loud like that, because you gotta kind of walk the walk, right? Like you gotta kind of be confident in the face of not being confident. And sometimes like that breeds like this facade in some people that becomes like this thing that you can't go back on now, right? Like so ultimately, I love that you guys have always been so incredibly true to who you are as people, always easy to work with, always like on time, right? Like, you know, because we started our relationship way before radio. It was like, or it might have been, I was still doing radio, but like I was still like mostly promoter kind of radio guy. Now it's kind of flipped, but like, oh, by the way, like I totally spaced on the fact that the name was Walden. Like that was like a bell that went off in my head when you said it.
Yeah, when you first met us, we were Walden.
Yeah, I remember that now. But yeah, dude, like what I will say to you, and I think I say this to you a lot, is like, even in retrospect, don't overthink it, right? Like it seems like all of you guys are in a great space right now with the first part of the EP coming out in May. You seem really like more jazzed for it than anything that I've seen you release prior to this, right? So like, instead of looking back, and we'll make a point of that for the rest of this podcast, is to not look back anymore, but let's look at what comes next, because you've unlocked that next level, in my opinion, right? Like with getting over that hurdle of yourselves, right?
Like, which is the biggest hurdle there is. Right.
And now we're in a space where there's a new EP coming at the end of May. There's 2 singles out in the world. There's plans for part 2 of the EP come fall, which means if there's music out there, that means that you guys are obviously playing some gigs. So let's jump into the next batch of gigs you've got, so that the people listening might have an opportunity to come and see it live. Because I know for me, like you can probably add 6 months to that 2 years we've all been in lockdown since I've seen you guys on a stage.
Yeah, getting back out has been, I think I told you like earlier in our little pre-interview when we were just chatting, like having the courage. Like I didn't think that was going to be a thing. Like I was so ready to play shows again. And then I remember like our first show was coming up and I was like, oh dude, how do I do this? Like I felt like I had to like build up the courage again to just get on stage. And we've had, you know, like a handful of gigs since. We've kind of taken our time seeing how the world plays out, but it feels so good to be back on stage. We had a really fun show a couple nights ago, or a couple weeks ago, down at Funk. People just get back into the swing of things, but it's great to be back on stage, and I'm really excited. So we've never done this before. We are playing 2 shows in Canada for the first time in a couple weeks. We're going up to play with Long Range Hustle. You should definitely check out their tunes. They're doing some cool stuff, new music coming out for them, really cool content coming out from them. So we're going to go 2 dates with them in Canada, in the Ontario area. Tweed, Ontario is one of them, which I love the name of that. And Bancroft is the other one. So very excited for that. Also new opportunities, new friends, new people to play with. It's always fun. Then we're back home at Funk and Waffles on May 14th with our all-time favorite people and just the freaking homies. Johnny and the Man Kids. Like we've known them for like 4 years now, and we always toss each other gigs, and they're actually coming through. We're opening for them this time. And I think definitely come to see us, but come out and see them play for an hour and a half, because it's a freaking treat. Like every time they've opened for us, it's always like 45, 50 minutes. And they throw down for that 45, 50 minutes. We went out to Buffalo to see them play like an hour and a half headlining gig, and they just rip for like an hour and a half, nonstop, amazing energy. So I cannot wait to share the stage with them again. And to be honest, they played funk enough where they've definitely earned the right to headline. Like they're going to kill it. And then, May 28th, we're down in New York City to play Rockwood Music Hall, stage 1. And we're playing at 11. We always get the late slot there, which is fun. The later slot for us. I know they're open till like 2, but
11 in New York City is a little different than 11 in Syracuse.
Right. Yes, that's true. But we get a good slot. Like I'm always excited. Like we get a good slot. And
11 in New York City is like 9 o'clock in Syracuse.
Yeah. No, we've done well. So we've played there. This will be like our third time playing there, playing at Rockwood. And I think we've always had like 10 or 11 every time. And it's just a blast. Unfortunately, we can't bring the whole band down for that one. So Corey and I are doing like a duo gig, but Corey and I have been experimenting with how to make that a little more special. And then, yeah, June, we're still kind of booking out June. We're playing at Funk again on the 18th with Long Range Hustle when they do their East Coast tour. And yeah, keep your eyes peeled because we're booking right now. And definitely more dates are coming in. So more dates are falling in line. I cannot wait to get on the road again, really. Because it's been a while since we've played outside of Syracuse.
You guys have done some, I don't want to say extensive touring because that implies like, full US numerous times. Right. Like, but you guys have had more than your fair share of, I feel like I'm crapping on anybody, but like you hear a lot of like regional bands be like, hey, we're going on tour this weekend. And it's like, bro, like,
yeah.
That's just because you played Utica and then, Vernon. I don't know if that constitutes a tour. Like, yeah, you had a fun weekend, right? You got to go play some music with your friends. But you guys have done like the actual tour dog thing.
Yeah, it's tough to plan for. It's, when you're independent like us, but we did a 2-week East Coast tour in 2018, which has some of my favorite music memories ever and some of my least favorite music memories ever. Because I think that's just how touring goes. I think that's just, especially when you're at our level and you don't know a lot of the places and people. And then we got to go out and tour a bit out west. We actually ended up playing Denver Music's Sun Drenched Summer Fest in Denver, Colorado. And that was incredible. I mean, Denver in the summer, we hiked like the day before, got to explore the city. It felt like a real touring thing. Like we explored the city. Yeah. We did like a hike. We had like the day, before to hang out. And then we went and played a set and the sound guy comes up to us and he's like, I had no idea what to expect from you guys. And this is like an old school sound guy. So I thought he was going to be like, you guys suck, get off the stage. He was nice, but intimidating. And he comes up, he's like, I had no idea what to expect from you guys, but he goes, y'all are legit. And then he just starts unplugging stuff. And I was like, fuck, okay. And then we played Cleveland on the way home, which we've played Cleveland a bunch, and Buffalo on the way home. So like not a major tour, but getting out to Denver. Oh, we played Louisville on the way out, Louisville, Kentucky on the way out, Denver, and then Cleveland and Buffalo. So yeah, like not a crazy tour, but a lot of miles.
Yeah, well, Colorado is a place that you want to be successful, right? Like, because it almost like, for me, and again, this is kind of like a biased radio opinion, but like the coolest things that are happening in radio are happening in Colorado, specifically Colorado Springs, in Denver, and then St. Louis, Missouri. So like the middle of the country is getting it right now, right? Like some of my two favorite stations outside of 95X are the Colorado Springs alternative station and St. Louis's alternative station. Like they just, like, it's almost like they live inside my brain, right? And then everybody I know, like Milky Chance, ended their tour in Colorado because they wanted to end it on a literal high note. Not only like the arts community in Colorado is unlike any place I've ever been in the country.
Yeah.
Like, and you can talk about Nashville and Memphis and all of these legendary music cities, but they all look back, right? Like,
I was gonna say, they're stuck in their ways.
Where like Colorado is just like, yo, this band only has 2 people and nobody plays guitar, go, right? Like, and then it's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
So for me, like, success in Colorado, especially like, I know hipster is like it's an insult now, right? Like that's
I guess so.
But like the hipper kids or the hipper people tend to gravitate towards Colorado, and it's made me change my mindset of wanting to retire to California, of being like, maybe I want to retire in Colorado.
Denver's cool, man. We got to, so my brother lived out there too, so I got to visit while he was out there. Yeah, it's a cool place, man. Boulder's rad. Reminds me of Ithaca, but with mountains.
Yeah.
Colorado Springs was gorgeous. Denver itself is like just a really unique city. And to be honest, Denver's super, it's not like it's massive, like downtown area. It's not gonna like overwhelm you.
Right.
But what you can do downtown is really fun. And then they have like these little neighborhoods that are kind of outside of it with like awesome coffee shops and people just playing outside of coffee shops, or, you know, some cool brewery where somebody's just like got a guitar and they're like, yeah, that guy's cool. He's actually playing at some venue so-and-so later. They have beercades, they got all sorts of stuff. But like, so it almost reminds me of like, you know, Syracuse has like its different neighborhoods. Like you can do cool stuff up at Westcott. You can do cool stuff on Tip Hill. You can do cool stuff downtown. It's got very much that vibe, but like way more developed and with like scope. Like somebody's been like thinking about this, being like, how can I really like make this cool? And they're like, oh, we got it. And then and to be honest, my brother even said they're really not just community centered. Like we're trying to make our area cool. Like they want people to interact with the greater like Denver area. And it's really cool. And I obviously didn't get to like live it like my brother did, but yeah, it just seems like they're all very connective and like super supportive of other businesses. Like other craft breweries will like house other craft beers from like the town, the, you know, the neighborhood over, and be like, oh, you haven't been there? Go check it out.
Yeah.
Like super cool stuff like that.
There's a severe collaboration vibe in Colorado.
Yeah, big time.
Right? Like where we all think we're collaborating, and then you look at like what businesses and the government is doing in Colorado, and you just go, oh, we should probably pay better attention over here, right?
Yeah, man.
Because there's just something special happening out there, both in the music scene, the arts community, politically. I think they're getting it right. And again, I don't want to have a political conversation.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
not in this day and age.
No, but I think with all of that collaboration, it leads to there being more of a community mindset, right? Because if there's one thing that I'm tired of, it's the competitive nature that is brought into art, because there's nothing about art in its truest form that's competitive at all, except with the person creating it. Like you want to obviously be competitive with yourself to be better, whatever, and that goes into any portion of your life. Anything that you want to do, obviously you want to be a little bit competitive with yourself to make sure that you're gradually growing. But like I hate that Syracuse has always been super competitive and very rarely collaborative. And no matter how much I've tried, like it just never seems to fall in line, where it just seems like there's dividing lines and there's cliques. And what I love is that you guys have always been cool about like just not necessarily pledging allegiance to any of those things and just being yourselves, right? I think that's what makes you stand out so much.
Well, we try to. And, you know, I think when we were younger and when we first met you, we got sort of roped, you know, into that. You know, you want to be good, you want to be popular, you have to do this, you have to play with these people. These are the people. And after working with them, and I'm obviously not going to name names, but after working with these people, the people, you realize how little they really wanted to help you at all. And that's not true of all of them, of course. There were definitely people who gave us a ton of confidence, yourself included, reaching out, or, hey, why don't you come to this showcase? And I think I wore like a freaking like pirate shirt to one of them. I looked like an idiot. Like I had no idea what I was doing, but you kept inviting us. You're like, all right, that kid with the pirate shirt probably should lose the pirate shirt, but we'll bring him back. You know, I think like Missy Thomas, who's very active in the music scene and has become a very good friend of ours, was always supportive and looking for the right opportunities for us, or at least saying, hey, go shake a hand. If you don't want to work with him, that's cool, but I know this person. I think Jess Novak was really supportive in the open mic stuff and giving us some good advice. Some advice we didn't take, obviously. We wanted to do our own thing, but she was very supportive in the beginning. Anthony Saturno was a good collaborator with us, but I think there was a certain point when we kind of just were like, this is not what we're about, and we're going to do what we want to do, work with who we want to work with. And I think when push comes to shove, that was definitely the better decision. But I remember it was tough, because it did feel like a lot of people turned their backs on us, and it was like, oh, okay, I guess we're dead now. Like what what happens now? But yeah, it's weird. Corey made this joke a while ago, and I still think it's really funny. Syracuse is the almost town. We almost did the right things. Like in so many different instances, it was like almost did the right thing.
I think Corey's giving Syracuse a little too much credit.
Interesting.
You know, because here's the thing, like, and again, I obviously love this place because I've stayed here my entire life. I fight for it. in every possible way that I can, especially within our arts community and for young people in our community. I feel like Syracuse can't stop looking over its shoulder at the past, right? Like, and it's been that way since I was in my early 20s, and I came into the scene, the industry, whatever you want to call it, the music business aspect of Syracuse. Everybody was always like, well, it was just so much cooler 20 years ago. It was just so much cooler. And it's just like, okay, we're in 2022 now, and y'all still aren't talking about the 90s yet. And that was 30 years ago, right? Like, that was when I was a teenager, right? Like, how come we don't talk about like Dracula Jones and Bone China and Spam Hammer and Earth Crisis and all these bands that like put Syracuse on the map? Like, we're still talking about the dudes from the 70s and the 80s, and here we are in 2022, and there's like a whole generation forward, like from 1995 forward, you might as well have not existed, right? Like, and then everybody prior to that is just like, yeah, we're still going to talk about you, right?
Yeah. Do you think it's because there's like a lack of initiative? Like, I tried with our open mic series to really start to set a new precedent, and that was like I'm going to change the way we do open mics in Syracuse, and like that was like a fight, right? Like, I was like, oh my God, this is exhausting.
Syracuse fears change. Anybody of a certain age in Syracuse, in my opinion, is definitely afraid of doing anything different than they ever did before, and I think it's to our detriment, right? Like,
big time.
For me, it's just like I always push for change, right? Because I'm never satisfied. But a lot of people have gotten really content, and when you get content, it breeds complacency, and then when you get complacent, like, then you just get bitter, and there's so much there's so much of that. And you know what, I'll be the first one to raise my hand and be like, yup, that was me for a really long time, and then I almost died a bunch of times. Was like, that's no way to live your life, right? And I don't want anybody to have to go through the things I went through to get to the point where I'm at now. But unfortunately, I'm starting to realize now that I'm 11 years on the other side of like the flat line that that I don't know that I would have gotten there without it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Same token, like, my opinion, you know, if I'm your WebMD, Syracuse, like, your symptom is looking too far back and not like just in your rear view, right? Like, what's that thing we just missed? Did we just run over something? Like, you know what I mean? No, that's just the corpse of like the band that gave up because after trying for 5 years, nobody noticed them, right? Like, that's Syracuse. Like, I cannot tell you how many bands should have made it on a much grander scale, but didn't because the community didn't support them. Like, the one I think that stands out the most and probably hurts the most for me is the Scarlet Ending, right? Like, and I think you're probably a little young to have like fully experienced them in their prime, but like the Scarlet Ending were like, in Syracuse's defense a little bit, they were a few years ahead of their time, right? Twin sisters, instrumentation that is not typically in a rock band, with violin in keys and 4-part vocal harmonies and dynamics. And they were one of the first bands that I really recall bringing almost like an element of musical theater to a rock space. And they went over just as well on bands with like Murder by Death as they did when we would put them on a crazy show like Under Oath, where kids would like fight invisible ninjas all night, but stop at the beginning of the show. And really freak out for like this really interesting band. And nobody in Syracuse really like gave them their due. Like, I feel like I was the only one that ever felt like I made a big deal out of them. And it's just a bummer because now Kaylee is out doing like all kinds of big stuff with Kevin Devine and Frank Turner, and like all of these collaborations. She's playing with all these artists and touring, and she's releasing her records, and it's just like, y'all missed it, right? Like, you could have had the whole thing. And I feel like in your generation of like your sort of like your class of Syracuse, right? Like all the bands that popped off around the same time. Like, there's too many good bands for our scene to be as marginalized as it is by the mainstream, well, not even mainstream, but the media in general in Syracuse, right? Like, where
well, I mean, who else? Who else other than you really cares about us, though? Who else other than you really cares about us?
Well, there's a million people that write or say they write, right? Like, why aren't these people like submitting these pieces of work to like the actual publications that have like real grand scale in Syracuse, right? Like again, and it's because Syracuse is competitive. I've carved out these 200 people that have joined my group on this social media platform, and they are my people. And that you know, like it's just like, and now you've got your 200 people over here. And we're not, instead of making like one thing that could have 400 or more people, it's just like I'm gonna keep my thing and you keep your thing, and it's a separate thing. And that is for me like just the epitome of how everything in Syracuse works.
Yeah, man. I mean, people have told us a couple of times, and it hurts because we do love Syracuse. We feel like this is home. We feel like we're given, like, I feel like I can live just a nice life with my friends, but also, you know, go and be a musician and have that freedom here to create. And I think the change of seasons around here really help when you're creating. And I don't know, I've been living on Tip Hill for 3 years and I absolutely adore living up here. But I just, so many people for like years have been like, if you want to make it, you have to leave Syracuse. And it's like hard to think about that because this is my home. Like, and it's not something we haven't contemplated, but just like uprooting your life is a lot, even if it is for the thing you love. And I don't want to feel that way.
Well, there's advantages, right? Because there's a lot of major markets that are within a 6-hour drive.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so like you can do New York, you can do Boston, you can do all the cities in Vermont.
Yep.
You've got Pennsylvania with Philly, Pittsburgh, the tri-state area in New Jersey. You've got Toronto, Cleveland, Columbus.
Yep.
Right. Like, so it's a great hub, right? And the cost of living here isn't that bad, even though we're in New York.
It's very reasonable.
Right? And you know, imagine if Syracuse was in Pennsylvania, how cheap things really would be, right? Like,
yeah,
can you imagine? Like, but same token, like for all of like the ease of use and for how, I mean, our city is very easy to navigate. There's not really traffic here for a city of this size, right? Like, hell, man, we've got one of the best like selections of good, if not great, ethnic restaurants that I've ever been.
Yeah, we have great stuff.
There's some amazing things here. But man, where are the art galleries? Right? Like, where's the non-alcoholic music venue that people know about?
Yeah.
Like,
well, we've always had an issue with lack of music venues and like being like spread out and diverse.
Yeah. Well, again, it's just, I think there's a disconnect, right? I think that like, for the most part, I mean, I've worked for enough bar owners that I can say that there are some great ones and there are some awful ones, and man, it is really there's never been that middle ground, right? They're either like the dopest person or they're the absolute worst person, you know, like there's just no in between. And then like there's like this again Syracuse mentality of like, well, if I'm gonna go to a show, I gotta drink a beer. And it's like, okay, well, you do realize that like Gen X and boomers, that young people, maybe they don't drink now, right? Like, because like there's this whole world of information that they've dove into and realized that, hey, maybe that's not for me, right? So maybe I don't want to be around a bunch of drunk old people in a bar when I want to go see a band play. Is there a space I can go watch a band where not everybody's going to be drunk? And the answer to that question in Syracuse is no, there is not. Right. And that's a bummer to me because like I grew up in all of those places like the Westcott Community Center and Club Polsky on Teal Ave, where it was just like a bunch of us cobbed together, like a halfway decent, let's just a loud vocal PA. And we booked a bunch of our friends' bands and we did the best we could. And it was a blast, right? Like, and then we all grew up and we're just like, there's got to be like, I got to be able to get a Jack and Coke. I think that like as I've gotten older and realized that like young people don't have the same interests and ideals that I did, that like now I'm trying to like retrofit this ideology to Syracuse of like, yo, we need a common space that we can put 3 bands on a Friday night and everybody can still make out on the deal, right? Like I think that if there was something in the community that it has a certain cost, but still allowed the artists to make money. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that it could behoove us, you know, like I look at the Center for the Arts in Brewerton, which is like right up the road from me. And like, I so desperately want to like find more places like that where music can just happen, right? Where you can just call and go, hey, you charge $250 for the room. I'd like to have it on Friday the 31st, please. And
Yeah.
then I will send you a deposit. And then I show up with the PA and the band show up. And we do this fun little thing, right? Like, and then at the end of the night, everybody can walk out of there with a little bit of money.
Yep.
You know, like, I don't see how that's so hard, but like,
Well, that used to be the Spark, right? The Spark Art Space. That's where I got my first gigs in college. The Spark had its moments of like, especially if Nick Berger was putting a show on, it was gonna be a fun time.
Here's the thing though, and again, I'm not trying to crap on anything because I love Spark. I love Nick. Nick's one of my favorite human beings.
Yeah,
but that was not the safest neighborhood.
No, it was sketchy
to be okay with their teenage kids going there.
Yeah, it was a little sketchy.
Right.
Which, as a 19-year-old though, playing a show there felt sort of rock and roll and cool. But yeah, I understand if my parents weren't stoked.
Never got broken into. I'm guessing like you never got accosted by some weird neighborhood dude that was off his meds. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and it's a little different.
Yeah, no, I got lucky, I guess. I don't know.
And it's also different for us being like, you know, like white dudes walking around.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I know again, like it's overused in 2022, but there needs to be a relatively safe space for artists to use that are also friendly for an audience that wants to attend. And, you know, like as cool as downtown is, as cool as like the city is, maybe this is a project for the suburbs, right? Because most people are living in the suburbs now. There's not a whole lot of like urban living left anymore.
Yeah.
You know, in the spaces that are there have been gentrified, right? Like, I don't know about you, but I'm not paying $2,000 a month to live someplace I can't park my car.
Oh, I'll never live downtown.
Yeah.
I'll never live downtown.
And God bless all of you that do. I mean, again, not for me, but
to be honest, and the flip side of that too is like, as a band, we want to play our original music, right? So you want to play original music and you'd like to, you know, make a little coin. But you don't want to play for 3 hours because we don't have 3 hours of original content. So you go to you go to bar X where your buddy's like, oh, I'd see if you played there, and they have live music, and you go, and they go, what do you play? We're gonna go play our own music, and they go, cool, play 20% of your own music, 80% covers, and we'll pay you $300. I'm like, well, I got 4 guys. Can I at least get $100 a head? Well, if we make a lot of money, we'll throw $100 extra on. So like, okay, so not a guarantee. We got to bring our own sound system. You know, we're not even playing our own music. We don't even really get to promote ourselves. Because we did the bar thing for a while, and I'm so sick of drunk moms being like, can you play Jesse's Girl? And I'm like, nope, go listen to the radio or Spotify it. Like, I'm not playing that. We have a set list, and we have awesome covers that we picked out, by the way, that we don't really want to play, but we're here doing it. And you leave home and it feels good because you played music, and then you realize that because your friends are there or whatever, you ran up a bar tab and you bought some drinks for somebody, and all that money's gone anyways, which that's just our bad anyways. But at the same time, it's like, cool, this was kind of not what we set out to do. And why to like say we had a show, like that there's really no value in me filling my calendar with bar gigs when I can't promote myself, I can't sell my merch, or our band, I can't, sell our merch. I can't, really promote what we do, which is our music. I started saying no. I just was like, yeah, we used to get offers. And I think the best time we had recently was at Al's, because they literally were like, we know you guys at this point, so like, do whatever the hell you want to do. And I was like, cool. And they paid us better than expected, which was nice. But they weren't going to do it again, apparently. And I was like, okay, well then I'm not going to do the new deal. This, and it's just frustrating because I was like, cool, Al's was fun. And a lot of friends came because it was free. We don't have to pay to get in, sweet. But we got to play some new tunes. And one of the bartenders there was like, that's the first time I've seen that many people like up by the stage in a long time, like to the point where they were like moving some of those couches. And I was like, sweet, let's do it again. And then they were like, no. And I was like, what?
Yeah. And again, man, like, I can't speak for anybody, but not everybody looks at booking bands and hosting entertainment in the same way. My thought process is totally different. And I think that's why I don't do it anymore. Right. Like, I've just kind of like, I've gotten to a point where like, if I can't do things the way I see best, right, like from almost 3 decades of experience anymore.
Yeah.
because A, nobody gets it, or B, nobody's supporting it. Like, I threw myself fully into something else. I mean, and you know this because you've played a bunch of them. Like, there's a method to everything that I do, right? Like,
Yeah.
everybody thinks I'm insane because you all you do is book these 5-band showcases. None of the bands sound like each other, and it's just this big mess. And it's like,
Well, no, but that's why it's awesome.
what it is it's 5 different bands that have 5 different footholds in the local music scene, right? And then, like, I put them in an order that forces their crowds to interact, right? So if their crowds interact and the bands interact, and that's how you build a community, right? Like,
Yeah.
nobody wants to go see like 5 different versions of the same band in one
Yeah.
night, because like that's boring.
Yeah.
And nobody's gonna jump out and surprise you if everybody's like this mid-tempo strummy weird thing, or if everybody's all playing like blues oriented rock, or it's just 5 straight metal bands, right? Like,
Yeah.
kind of gotta, like, I would never put like you guys and Murder in Rue Morgue back to back on a show, because I know that that's never gonna work. But you guys could be on the same bill if we
Absolutely.
built from one end to the other, right? It's all about.
And also, you did a great job emceeing those. You emceed those events so well. I remember you'd introduce every band, you get on stage, you'd introduce every band, you'd give a little tidbit, there'd be a little break while we were, doing our thing. And then, it also made, we'd talk to the other bands in part too, because you were kind of there, and we'd go to thank you or something, and the other band would be talking to you, and you'd be like, oh, have you guys met? And you really broach it, everything really well. And we actually ended up getting a couple shows out of those gigs with other bands that we never even had heard of at the time.
And that's the whole thing, man. Like, I'm just a conduit in a network between people, right? Like, nobody understood that, like, I wasn't like the promoter, right? Like, I didn't do shows to make money. I had, like, for example, Lost Horizon. Like, I never made money off the shows of the Lost, because I worked for the Lost.
Yeah.
So, like, I would pay for the sound guy, and then whatever you drew is whatever cut you got, right? Like, so.
Yep.
And I have no problem saying this out loud, because nobody does this anymore, even though it's probably the fairest way to pay bands, is if you have 5 bands playing and it's $10 to get in, and the sound costs X amount, let's say $200, right? Like, so if there's 5 bands and it's $10 to get in, then each band needs to contribute their first 4 paid people to pay for the PA.
Yeah.
Right. So then after your 4, if you drew 50 people, then you would get the rest of the money after that first $50, right? Like, how hard is that to figure out? You just got to do your due diligence and hire a door person that's going to ask that question, right? Like, some of the people I hired didn't like doing that, and then I found the people that would, and that's a fair way to pay the bands, right? Like,
especially for a showcase. Yeah,
you're playing 30 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, it's for me, it was always about, like, what would happen if you got this band and this band in the room? Like, I feel like these guys and these guys would get along, and I think their audiences would mingle. And then there's ideology of, like, hey, these 2 bands don't sound anything alike, but they're the same age, right? And they're in the same high school. So let's see how that works, right? Or it's, and in my head, these 2 things would sound really good back to back. Sometimes it didn't. That's on me. But like, it's all about, like, stepping outside that comfort zone of just being like, well, if I'm gonna book Vaporize, who does Vaporize normally play with? I'm gonna book their, and then it's like, well, that show already happened, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
That's what everybody wants to do, is they're just like, well, there's these 3 bands, right? I'm just gonna put them in a different order. It's a different show that way. It's not.
No, it's not. That's why we bring people in from out of town a lot.
Well, it's about giving the people that are paying their money at the door an experience that they haven't had before, in my opinion, right? Like, I would always, like, every once in a while, I would throw some, like, wild card thing onto a show, right? That was why, like, when I was doing that band Dome, like, we were a weird cover band that should not have been on 5 band original band bills, but, like, every once in a while, you've just got to randomly play second on a show like that.
Yeah.
To kind of, like, shake the tree a little bit, right? Like, make the night a little wild.
We played on an awesome bill that you put up with us. That was the first time we ever saw Matty Dell Music Collective, which that made sense, us playing together. And then Big Sexy played and, like, brought the house down. Like, and we became friends with those guys to the point where, like, we never did a show together, but, like, I'd go watch them if they were playing, you know what I mean? Like, they were just such a fun band. And speaking of dudes who they've I mean, I don't even know if they're still, it doesn't seem like they're still together anymore, but they've progressed. Their talent is pretty wild now too.
Well,
What they're up
doing
to.
his like solo thing.
Yep. Out
So
wherever.
I know he's got a new single coming. He had one last year that ended up in the top 15 at the end of the year.
Yeah, that one was a good one. That was
Really,
fun.
really good.
And then what's the guitar player? I can't think of his name. Always wear the always wear the backwards hat. AJ.
Yeah.
He's like just like making beats. I don't even know if they're still working together, but like he'll like throw these cool videos up on Instagram, and like at like this point, I watch most of them now. Cause like he's just like doing like these little producing things, and like his guitar playing's gotten better, and like he's just like writing all this really cool stuff. And like once again, not something that I could either add to or would want to collab on, but it's just like, nah, dude's doing cool stuff. But like, yeah, man, I remember those showcases. I was actually just talking to Corey because I told him that I was, we're doing this, and we were in the studio Sunday because we're actually recording new music already because that's how we operate. And he was like, what's Dixon up to other than the radio now? Because he remembered like you putting on all these showcases, and I was like, I think he's just really focused on the radio stuff. And obviously it seems like 95X is doing some other shows around here that you guys are promoting
this summer at Beacon Skiff with The Head and the Heart.
That's right. Yeah, you guys are promoting
Death Cab and Dashboard.
I know, going to Death Cab, so excited.
I'm going to be on vacation, so unfortunately I won't be here for that one, but I am sad because I love Ben Gibbard.
Yeah,
but then like, Festapalooza-thon, like we're always putting our own things together as well, right? Like Milky Chance and Ripe.
That's at the Island, right?
Yeah, like right on.
That's so I grew up in Beeville, and we only, they just never utilized it the way they should have. I love the Island.
You and me both, man. There is some of my favorite moments have been like introducing a band, or usually it's the headliner, right? Like the sun is just at that point where it's like
beautiful
end of the Y, where the rivers can and you can just sort of see it over the end of the island, and you're bringing like the headliner on, and everybody's amped up, and it's just like, for me, like I've never felt more like in a summer moment than like,
oh my God, yeah,
in the Silver Sun pickup.
It's just yes, Silver Sun was an amazing show. So glad I got to see that when Trench opened, right?
Yeah.
That was cool to see them up on a stage like that. Yeah, man, underutilized venue, and someone who grew up in Beeville, like someday I will play that stage, obviously, and
make that happen.
If I will play that stage, yes, I would. Corey's from Beeville too. And Corey and I mean, when I was a kid, I wasn't even like a musician yet, but I like bike down there and just like jump up on that stage and like look out and be like, what would this feel like? And it's a great venue, man. But yeah, Corey and I were both saying that like we kind of miss those showcases, and it would kind of be fun to be like the older dudes now at those showcases and be like, you bring in like the Kiwis or something like that, who I've been keeping my eye on.
I love them.
They're doing some cool stuff, man. So I'm gonna keep my eye on them, and I'm like, that'd be cool to be like, yeah, we did this too. And like, now we got we got to work with a producer in New York City, and we got to tour a bit, and like, it'd be cool to be like, yeah, like, or like, let's go do a show, or like, let's go do something. And obviously I can reach out to them, but it'd be fun to meet them in that capacity. And
yeah, I think we can make something like that happen. I've got something in the back of my mind for September that I will hit you guys up for soon.
Please do.
Absolutely.
I'd love that.
Well, with that, Rob, I think we'll put a pin in this conversation and urge people to check out the new EP, Colorful Lung Part 1, May 27th, available everywhere. You'll be in New York City the day after. There's gigs coming up. It's allpoetsandheroes.com for all the information. And you guys have a really unique name, and there's only one of you when you search for it on social.
Super easy. Not better if it was Walden still. Too many things would
be a lot of bookstores popping up.
Yeah, exactly. Always good talking to you, Dixon.
Always a pleasure catching up, man. Please give the rest of the guys my regards, and we will chat very, very soon.
Yeah, sounds good, man.
Excellent. Once again, this is the Locals Only podcast for 95X.